Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. President Trump is heading to Salt Lake City, Utah today to meet with Mormon leaders. Back in Washington, he's facing new questions in the Russia investigation. CBN's Jenna Browder has the story from Washington.
It's not clear where the special counsel investigation is going. The White House and some Republicans downplaying former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's guilty plea for lying to the FBI about his conversations with Russia.
That plea agreement does not, to me, indicate that there's very much else there.
Some critics are calling all of this politically motivated, and the president pointed to anti-Trump text messages sent by one FBI official on the special counsel's team. Robert Mueller removed him from the position, but Trump said the FBI's credibility is, quote, in tatters. Despite the criticism, Democrats have a different view.
I think what we're beginning to see is the putting together of a case of obstruction of justice.
Senator Dianne Feinstein telling Meet the Press the obstruction evidence is coming partly from the president's tweets about fired FBI Director James Comey. Trump tweeting over the weekend, "I never asked Comey to stop investigating Flynn." Critics say that tweet goes against Comey's sworn testimony that Trump asked him to ease up on his investigation into Flynn.
I understood him to be saying that what he wanted me to do was drop any investigation connected to Flynn's account of his conversations with the Russians.
But Trump's personal attorney, John Dowd, says he actually wrote the tweet, not the president, and that he wrote it wrong. And on Capitol Hill, all eyes are on a different subject, tax reform. Now that the Senate and House have both passed their tax measures, it's now a matter of working out their differences and agreeing on one final bill. Republicans are confident they can make it happen, and Trump has suggested he might settle for a higher business tax rate, 22% instead of 20%. The president seems unconcerned about the special counsel probe, and at the same time, he appears to be on the verge of his biggest legislative accomplishment so far, one that could have a major impact on the economy. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
The U.S. is participating in a major show of force in South Korea 1 week after the North test-fired its most powerful missile to date. The drills, held over 5 days, are meant to improve South Korea's military preparedness. In total, 230 aircraft will fly in the war games. 12,000 U.S. military personnel are participating. Pyongyang says the U.S. and South Korea will, quote, pay dearly for their provocations. Sunday, President Trump's national security advisor said the U.S. will take care of the North Korean threat by doing more ourselves. This week, both Washington and Jerusalem are participating in one of President Trump's most important foreign policy decisions, whether to move the embassy of the United States from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. At the Saban Forum Sunday, Trump's personal envoy to the Middle East peace process, Jared Kushner, told the audience the president is still undecided.
The president's going to make his decision, and
he hasn't made his decision?
He's still looking at a lot of different facts, and that when he makes his decision, he'll be the one to want to tell you, not me. So he'll make sure he does that at the right time.
It's expected President Trump will make an announcement about the issue on Wednesday. He could decide to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem or even declare Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Whatever Trump's decision, it has generated a great deal of speculation. At the same forum, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu explained why he keeps warning the world about Iran.
I speak so often about Iran because I read history. When tyrants call for the destruction of my people, I believe them. I don't have the luxury of discounting their genocidal threats. So let me reiterate Israel's policy. We will not allow a regime hell-bent on the annihilation of the Jewish state to acquire nuclear weapons. We will not allow that regime to entrench itself militarily in Syria, as it seeks to do, for the express purpose of eradicating our state.
Recently, Netanyahu said Israel will not tolerate an Iranian military presence inside Syria within 40 kilometers or 25 miles from Israel's northern border on the Golan Heights. Soon you'll likely be able to get much more than a Band-Aid at your local CVS store. The drugstore chain is buying health insurer Aetna in an effort to grow more into customer care. CVS already runs 1,100 clinics nationwide. The $69 billion deal catapults the second largest drugstore chain in a direction it's been moving for years. 3 years ago, the chain stopped selling tobacco products to boost its healthcare image. Coming up, from Israel to tax reform and life's greatest blessing. Hear what Vice President Mike Pence has to say about these huge topics. You don't want to miss this CBN News exclusive. Welcome back. President Trump may soon recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move the U.S. Embassy to the Holy City. That was just one of the important issues CBN's David Brody talked about with Vice President Mike Pence in an exclusive interview. The Vice President also discussed the wave of sexual harassment scandals and whether Congress will be able to get tax reform done by Christmas. Here's part one of David's interview.
As he walked into the picturesque library at the U.S. Naval Observatory, we had quite a bit to ask the Vice President. One huge topic, Israel. Specifically, would the President move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? He promised during the campaign to do so, but has held off. Senior White House sources tell CBN News discussions are underway to figure out a way to do it. In the meantime, there are now reports that initially the President could announce the U.S. will recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital city.
But the President and I believe that the relationship between the American people and the people of Israel is one that is timeless. I mean, literally before the founding of this country, there were Americans who prayed for and dreamed of Israel returning to its ancient homeland. And through the tragedy and tragic events of World War II and the Holocaust, and through strong American leadership at the United Nations, Israel was restored to her homeland, as the old book says, in a day, in a moment. And I know the President is reflecting on the decision about our embassy and other policies, but it's all informed by his commitment to the relationship between the United States and Israel, and his knowledge that the American people cherish our ally Israel, and we always will.
All of this will grow even larger when the VP heads to Israel and Egypt later this month.
If the world knows nothing else, the world should know this. Under President Donald Trump, America stands with Israel. And we'll be delivering that strong message. It was 70 years ago that the nation of Israel, in a miracle of history, came back into existence in its ancient homeland, and every day Americans have cherished that accomplishment, and we'll be there to celebrate that. But as we travel through the region as well, we'll also reaffirm our commitment to peace in the region. The President's made it clear that we want peace, but people should know that President Donald Trump will never compromise the safety and security of the Jewish state of Israel in the midst of that process. I'll also be traveling to Egypt, where we'll be talking about the issue of persecuted Christians and religious minorities across the wider Arab world. I couldn't be more proud of the fact that in the wake of seeing half of the Christian population flee from Syria, 80% of the Christian population has now left Iraq, that President Trump made the decision to now begin to funnel U.S. support, not through the United Nations in every program, but for the first time directly through USAID to help rebuild Christian communities and the communities of other religious minorities that have for too long been neglected.
Will that start soon?
We're hoping to make announcements during my trip through the region, David.
Here at home, the issue of sexual harassment has gripped the nation. It's something the Vice President hasn't really discussed at length publicly, at least until now.
So many people want to know, what's the solution? What's the answer? Where's the morality in all of this in terms of what can be done? Do you legislate it? Is it a cultural issue? What are some, can you help folks with some answers here about what's been, light has been shined on this topic, on this very important issue?
Well, as as Vice President and as the father of two really talented and wonderful young women, I think we're seeing real progress in our society today. Every American woman is entitled to a safe and productive workplace. And my heart goes out to the women who have endured sexual harassment in the workplace, and I admire their willingness and their courage in coming forward. But I think it's initiating a national conversation about practices in our businesses and in our public institutions that will make sure that women and men have the kind of work environment that is safe and respectful to all concerned. And I think the President and I both see that as progress.
What do you make exactly of, and you're not one to take a victory lap, but you got beat up on, they called it the Pence rule, and then Billy Graham even before that, just this idea of making sure you're taking the proper steps to not have perception, and the perception becoming reality. What is your view of that? Because you got beat up in the media pretty well for that.
Well, God's greatest blessing in my life is my wife, Karen. And look, every marriage is different. And when we got married 32 years ago, we sat down and talked to one another about guidelines. And we live those out in our life, and they've been a blessing to us. And I have to tell you, criticism comes with the job, and we accept that. But I've been very moved over the last few months by how many people have stopped me as I've traveled around this country and given me a word of encouragement and expressed support for our decision to put our marriage and our family first. And I'm always blessed by that. I really am, David.
Legislatively, the big issue on the table is tax reform, and there is a big question to be answered.
The tax reform, is it going to be in the Christmas stocking stuffer? Is this going to get done by Christmas? What's the prediction?
Well, we believe it will. President Trump and I have been working literally around the clock with members of the Senate, and before that with members of the House of Representatives. And we really believe that before Christmas comes, we're going to deliver to the American people the largest tax cut in American history. And as the President has said, it's going to be a middle-class miracle. This is tax relief that's going to benefit working families across this country with real and immediate tax relief. The average American family will have more than $1,200 in their pockets when this passes. But more than that, we're going to reform our business taxes in this country so that companies large and small can begin to compete with companies around the world again. And that'll create jobs. And we also know that by reducing taxes on businesses, we'll see wages rise in this country. And so we're very close. We're going to continue to work closely with members of the Senate to move legislation this week. Then it'll be off to what's called a conference committee to work out the differences. But we really do believe that, as the President said just yesterday, that the American people are going to get a great Christmas present this year, and it's going to be a big, beautiful tax cut that'll benefit their families and benefit this growing American economy.
Speaking of that economy, what about the concern about the deficit? Jeff Flake, Bob Corker, friends of yours who say, hey, wait a minute here, we hope the economy keeps humming, but is there going to be some sort of trigger mechanism that they want to raise rates if the economy doesn't continue to hum?
We respect the fact that members of Congress want to make sure that 5 or 6 years down the road, if unforeseen circumstances cause a downturn in the economy, that we make sure and not add a burden of debt to our children and grandchildren. But I think from the President on down, we really do believe that by allowing Americans to keep more of what they earn, allowing businesses to be able to reinvest in ways that will create jobs and opportunities, that we're not only not going to see deficits from these tax cuts, but when they're all fully implemented, we think you're going to see not only incomes rise in this country, our economy grow, but you're also going to see the federal government have even more resources to provide for our military, to meet the obligations that we've made to people through all the various programs. And we think this is really all about growth, and it's going to result in a growing economy.
David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
And you can see the second part of David Brody's sit-down interview with Vice President Mike Pence tomorrow, right here on NewsWatch. Up next, rallying for unity and peace in Charlottesville. See how the Virginia community is coming together to heal the racial divide. Just a few months after the deadly riots that took place in Charlottesville, Virginia, the organizer of the Unite the Right rally is making plans to hold another one. All of this on the heels of an independent review from that day that found major lapses in judgment between state and local police. Amber Strong has the story on how faith leaders are rallying for unity and peace.
4 months after violence on the streets of Charlottesville during a Unite the Right rally, a different scene. Protest replaced by prayer.
This unity bring unity into the city and bring healing and transformation.
Faith leaders from across the nation gathered right here on the streets of Charlottesville, where it all began, praying for healing and forgiveness. They marched through the streets, past the Robert E. Lee statue, and the scene of Heather Heyer's death.
Houston got hit by a physical hurricane. We kind of got hit by a political one, a spiritual one.
Dr. Mark Belials is a Charlottesville pastor and one of the co-chairs for Healing for Charlottesville. He says the path to healing begins with humility.
Healing for Charlottesville emerged out of that with this goal, basically not for the press, really, not for anyone else. It's not to blame anyone else. It's not to do anything, but just humble ourselves before God. And we believe out of that, solutions can come and healing can come.
Faith leaders like Will Ford and Matt Lockett say their unique story is an example of how a conversation can lead to tearing down racial barriers.
I had this dream in 2004 about Martin Luther King, which led me to doing a prayer gathering the following year on Martin Luther King Celebration Day at the Lincoln Memorial.
That prayer gathering included a speech about Ford's slave ancestors and a kettle used to muffle their prayers as they called out to God. Lockett was there for that speech.
So I heard the story about the kettle and I thought, wow, this is an amazing story. But then Will had shared a detail about it, that this kettle, which is a memorial stone of the prayers of the past, had been handed down through the generations, and it was handed down through a Lockett family.
That speech led to a deep friendship. Soon they discovered Ford's ancestors worked the Lockett family plantation.
You know, of course, Dr. King said in his I Have a Dream speech, I have a dream that one day the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners would sit down together at the table of brotherhood.
The pastors are rallying as an independent review found state and local police partially at fault for the chaos that took place in August. After interviewing more than 100 people and reviewing 500,000 documents, an independent firm found there was a breakdown in communication. Many officers were unsure what their instructions were, or were told to stand down in the face of confrontation. They also say there was one officer on duty at the scene that would lead to Heyer's death. That officer asked for assistance when she saw the crowds. Instead of receiving backup, she was relieved of her post. No one was sent to replace her. Meanwhile, the organizer of the last Unite the Right rally has petitioned the city for a permit to hold another one. As CBN News showed you in August, clergy in the area were praying and meeting before the last rally. So what makes this prayer gathering any different?
But to a great degree, I would say the majority white evangelical church is not a part of that. It hasn't been engaged in that. That's tend to be a little bit more of the more mainline denominational and I can say a little more liberal kinds of churches and other religious groups.
He says this time around, in order to see a united Charlottesville, we must first see a united church.
How can we awaken the entire body of Christ? How can we mobilize everyone? Maybe we can't all agree on how we worship and our spiritual beliefs. There's very genuine differences that keep us apart on that level. And we're not asking people to give up those beliefs. But for the good of our city, we believe as human beings, we can restore a respectfulness in our community for all people.
He believes there's strength in numbers and in unity that can prevent the next tragedy. Amber Strong, CBN News in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Thank you, Amber, and it's good to see unity being restored in Charlottesville. It is a process, but it's good to see progress taking place. We'll be right back with more of CBN NewsWatch. Don't go away. Operation Blessing is still at work with its relief and recovery efforts in Puerto Rico, more than 2 months after Hurricane Maria hit the island. One tiny fishing village called Punta Santiago was nearly destroyed. The storm knocked out all their power. Even worse, it affected the community's prime source of income, fishing. Operation Blessing is helping these fishermen to get back to work. They provided 10 boats and more motors to help the men get back on the water, and they also installed a reverse osmosis water system to provide the village with safe drinking water. Wonderful to see. Well, that's it for now on CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care about most at cbnnews.com. And tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.